Diaries, the automotive industry research related. They will be presenting insights into the industry, and it's great to have them here today. So further today, we wanted to just do a couple housekeeping items. First, we have as a part of the MRIA membership, and some of the bigger goals we have is bringing together research professionals, leaders in the industry, and creating a forum, topics you want discussed, courses you want taught, so on and so forth. And what I want to do here is quickly, and I don't think I should even risk it because we were just given really a trouble through the past 5 minutes here, but we do have a new web platform, a new learning management software that will be able to kind of coordinate all the certifications, all of the courses that we offer. But a really good opportunity for teachers if you have, if you really want to put some of your research forward or your techniques or your methods. It's going to be a hub for you to present to the Canadian industry and the world researchers. And without further ado, I don't want to waste any more time, but we do have some information of our upcoming webinars. We have one presented with Ipsos Global, and it's the screening on COVID-19 and the research related around that. We have Mastering Dashboards on November 12th. We have Big Tech, Small Tech, a Future of Business, and that will be to be announced in December. We also have the CMRP exam coming up on November 25th and November 26th. A good opportunity to use our new system. Me and Aaron Daddy have been working on all summer basically. But I am not going to waste any more time. I want to hand it over to JF Champagne, and he will talk to you about data ownership in the automotive market, aftermarket. Thank you. Take it away. Oh. Yeah, maybe he's not here. Or the microphones.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you.
My apologies. Good afternoon, everyone. And thank you, Dan, again, for the opportunity to come and talk to you today about the impact of the data ownership, not just broadly to the automotive space, but specific to the automotive aftermarket. So I'm Jeff Champagne. I am the president of AI Canada, or better known as the Automotive Industries Association of Canada. And you may wonder, so what's the aftermarket? Well, really the aftermarket is what comes after a car is sold. And so what we don't do in the aftermarket, I guess, is we don't manufacture the parts that goes into the assembly of a new vehicle. We don't assemble vehicle. We don't sell new vehicle. But we are an important component, a very important component of the entire automotive space. And I often say that make sure that the automotive aftermarket is never an afterthought. And just to give you a bit of perspective, and my apologies for the first slide having a lot of numbers on it, but let me point you out at a few numbers. 398,000 people. That's the number of people that work in the automotive aftermarket in Canada. And just to give you a perspective, that's more people than agriculture, or it's more than natural resources in Canada. Those are the people that you've crossed at maybe a Canadian Tire store, at your Napa Auto Pro repair center. Then maybe if you are someone to do a bit of fixing your car yourself, you might have been to a Napa stores or Uniselect parts stores. And this integrated supply chain employs that many people in Canada because, next number on the slide is 26.8 millions. That's the number of vehicles that we have on Canadian roads today. And so what we're often focused on, how do we sell a car? How do we assemble cars? We have to take care of making sure that Canadians remain safe on Canadian roads. And that's the work of the aftermarket, is to maintain those 26 million cars, which are, and again, third number, 9.71. And I know that number by now is closer to 10 years old on average. So if you look around, you go outside, and you look on the street, the vehicle that you're looking at is most likely on average about 10 years old. And that's what speaks to the automotive aftermarket is, as you probably know, most Canadian, you buy a new car, you're going to go back to the dealership who sold you the car. You want to maintain your warranty. But as your warranty expires after 5-6 years, more than about 70% of Canadians will choose to go to the aftermarket to get their car maintained. And so while the vast majority of vehicles are past a warranty period, we have, again, a very vast majority of Canadians who choose to have the aftermarket to fix their cars. So that's who we are. A big component of the economy, contributing more than $21 billion to the economy, employing a lot of people, and keeping vehicles safe. And when you think about the impact of that industry in the future in terms of what does it mean post-COVID, what does it mean in terms of the industry disruptors? Well, we all hear about EVs, right? Everyone wants to drive an electric car. And while they're definitely growing in popularity and being bought out by people, they still represent a very small percentage of the overall number of vehicles on Canadian road. We hear a lot about, we're going to have autonomous vehicle. And while they're coming for sure, this is slowly evolving. What is really on Canadian roads today, and Canadians don't really understand that, and will really try and start to transform how we relate to a vehicle or maintenance, its repairs, is telematics, or better known to all of us as the connected car. And so we do have a lot of these connected cars are already on Canadian roads, and we feel that by the year 2022, and quite frankly, that number is much closer to 95% than it is to 70%, if almost all of new cars sold in Canada are going to be connected cars using telematics system, which if some of you understand a bit about gigabytes, 25 gigabytes of information generated by these cars every hour. So why so much data? Well, there are so many sensors into these cars. But I'll give you an example. There has to be a sensor in your seat that's able to understand the weight that's in that seat because we want to have proper deployment of that airbag. Well, so there's a device in your car that can be transmitting information over telematics that tells you how much you weigh. The car, through its GPS technology, will probably be able to know what is the driving patterns and where you drop off your kids to school or to daycare. Furthermore, with the advent of AI, looking at your driving behavior, we would probably be able to determine whether or not you're taking medication, you're under the influence of drugs, or depressed. So that's the extent of information that is generated by the cars through telematics, and really is going to shape how we get our car serviced, where we go, and how we relate to our vehicles. So for us at AIA, it's important to understand consumer behavior. And so we had two series, one in 2016, one in 2019, that explore. The first one was called The Connected Car. The second one was about the attitude towards in-car data. It's trying to understand from a consumer perspective, do they really understand, who controls the data, the type of data that their car generates, and how is that data going to shape their decisions as to the type of parts they put on their cars for repair, where they go to buy their parts, and who they choose to have their parts installed for repair and maintenance. And so it was an interesting research that we conducted, and really what it drives to its central point is the whole data revolution. And if you think about in a perspective of car makers or automakers, cars are probably the second best thing after your cell phone in terms of the data that is very rich and relevant to who you are and what you do. And so it's no wonder that we start to see a lot of evolutions by the like of the Amazons and the Google of this world. We're very much looking at automotive as a new source of data, as a way to be able to shape our buying power, buying patterns, influence our decision, again, not just based on maintenance and service, but other aspects of our life. And so 58% was an interesting stat that was brought up about, we believe that eventually in the future, where today you're making a personal decision as to where and how you get your car serviced, it might be determined by the car itself, its technology. And so it's going to really influence and change how we go about to service a vehicle. Now, really at the root, what the fundamental problem of this whole access to data is that at its root, it's consumer choice. We need to make sure, as we do today, that consumers still have the right and the capacity to choose how and where they want to go to get their car serviced. You choose to go to Canadian Tire, Napa Auto Pro, or the Toyota dealership who sold you the car. And all three locations have access to the information. They have access to the tools. They have access to the parts that allows you to provide you with the best choice in terms of what you want to do to get your car serviced. So we ask Canadians, who do you think has ownership of data in your vehicle? And my apologies, some of the information is missing on the slide, but this is the responded from 2,000 Canadians. We asked the question. So who do you think owns the data in your car? And the first, I guess, purple or brownish block of 33% are people thinking that the vehicle owner is in fact in control and has ownership of the data in their car. So about a third of Canadians will tell you, yeah, I own the car, or I own the data that's generated by the car. About another third, 32%, have it right. They will tell you, well, I think the car manufacturer who sold me the car has ownership of the data generated by that car. The next 25% is people that don't know. So there's still a quarter of Canadians, when we talk to them about connected car, don't really understand what it is or the amount and extent of information generated by that car. Just simply don't know. 7% is technology developers, so whomever has designed that technology might be the one who owns the data. And the last 3% is the provincial government. So thinking that we're driving on public roads, maybe the government would have ownership of that data. But as I told you before, it is the automakers and the car maker today who controls and own all of that data from the vehicle. I think, and again, I'm sorry, we're missing some of those pieces from the slide, but let me show you quickly, if I could, give you a better sense of that slide. I'm going to turn this on, and you might be able to see it or see part of it. What it says is 1 in 3 Canadians believe the vehicle owner owns the data that is generated by their vehicle, essentially what we heard in the previous slide. But the second pie chart that you see here, which has the 88 and the 11%, is when you say to Canadian, do you think or who you think should own the data in a car? And 88% of Canadians will tell you, we believe that the car owner should be the person who owns and controls the data in their car. And I think that's what the telling story about the future of the impact of data on consumer choice, how we go about to get our car serviced and repaired, where we go, and who we choose to have business with. I will tell you that as we go, we're currently monitoring very closely something happening currently in the state of Massachusetts. So in the state of Massachusetts right now, there's a question on the ballot. So on November 3rd is the federal elections in the US, and essentially people in Massachusetts are being asked to also answer questions. And question 1 is, would you like to have control and ownership of the mechanical data in your car using telematics and being able to share that data with the automotive aftermarket? So this is how we keep the right to choose and the right to repair alive and well, is through those questions. We'll see what respondents in Massachusetts say on November 3rd. They voted yes to a similar question about 10 years ago, and we believe they'll vote yes again. Because again, the general public opinion says we should own and control the data. We should maintain consumer choice, continue to have a good competitive marketplace, and being able to choose who and how and when we want to get our car serviced. So hopefully that gives you a bit of a perspective of the impact of data and the data ownership in vehicle as it will shape future relationships and interactions between consumer and the automotive aftermarket. Here you go. That covers my presentation. I will now hand it over to Michaela for the next presentation. Michaela?
Thank you, John, and good afternoon. And thank you, Arundhati and Dan, for the opportunity to talk today. My name is Michaela Mora, and I'm the president of Relevant Insights and Market Research and user research agency located in the Dallas area, Texas. And our goal is to enable clients to make profitable decisions based on research. Today, I'll be talking about the role of UX in delivering better product and customer experience in general, the UX research cycle, how can it be applied to the automotive category, and what areas of research are relevant to the online automotive user experience. So what is UX? UX stands for user experience, which covers all aspects of the end user's interaction with the company, that is, its products, its services, its customer support, and even its marketing and channels and messages, which establish the expectations for the user experience. So user experience goes beyond usability or user interfaces, which are important to the experience, but are not the only contributing factors to the user experience, both online and offline. In the case of the automotive category, including vehicles and auto parts, the areas where user experience is relevant includes the product development process, the pre-sale stage where companies market their products, the point of sales occasion where users buy the products, and the post-sale stage where customers are using the product. Let's start with the product development process. This should be based on deep understanding of the user's needs and benefits they expect from the products. Essentially, we need to understand the job to get done, that what the users need to get done. The expected benefits can be functional or emotional or both, and they need to be supported by product features. But benefits should be at the center and not product features, because in reality, people care less about features and more about the product, what the product does for them. Also, in the product development process, a goal should be to make products that are easy to use, which is the essence of usability, and is supported by product design and interaction design. And finally, we need to take into account different user segments, since expected benefits may be different for different groups. In the pre-sale stage is when brands set the expectations for the user experience. Here, having knowledge of the user's needs allows us to create brand positioning that resonates with the target users through different marketing channels. And this could be any communication messages crafted to increase awareness or appeal through advertising, promotions, or PR. So we need to be careful about creating expectations that can be met by the product. This also includes expectations about the actual purchase experience, which becomes connected to the overall product experience. At the point of sale, the user experience is extremely important, in particular for buying vehicles, which is a big purchase for any household or individual in any country. So the experience when searching online for information about cars, auto parts, promotions, as well as the experience at the dealership when looking at cars, testing them, negotiating pricing, getting financing, have a big impact on where users decide to buy and what particular brand or product they end up buying. Then finally, in the post-sale stage, after the product is purchased, a new user journey begins marked by the experience using the product. This is where face-to-face interaction with the product really comes to life. And in the case of cars, maintenance and repair are always part of the user experience. Maintenance and repair is actually a whole journey in itself that starts when the car breaks on its checkup, with many decisions related to identifying the problem, deciding who does the repair, what auto parts are needed, where to buy them. So if a user is in maintenance and repair mode, access to customer support, their experience in interacting with customer service, and the quality of product information available is critical to the user experience. So in the context of these 4 stages of the automotive user experience, I want to bring up the concept of agile product development, which provides a framework to integrate research in any of these stages. First, let me say that agile here is synonymous with flexibility. It's about being flexible to adopt changes based on user feedback in an iterative way. It doesn't mean cheaper or faster product development. At the center of Agile is really user research. And the Agile product development process is meant to first start with the understanding of the user's needs and mental models, use those insights to create prototypes of potential solutions to meet those needs, then test those prototypes with actual users, learn what needs to improve, and then implement those improvements. And this cycle can go for several rounds until a final version is developed. So if we generalize this framework and apply it to any of the 4 stages that I just mentioned before, where we can start with identifying drivers and barriers to good user experience, generate solutions and create working prototypes or concepts, run tests to prioritize solutions and identify the ones with the most potential, and then implement those and check how they contribute to the user experience. Again, this model can be used to research any aspects of those 4 stages. Now, given the current COVID-19 situation we're living in, we can apply this framework specifically to the automotive online user experience in the pre-sale and point-of-sale stages. Why? Well, here are some facts from research done by Google. 93% of consumers are using their personal vehicles more. And 92% of auto shoppers are already doing a lot of online research. 65% expect more online purchase options in the future. 18% could have purchased a vehicle sooner if they had an online purchase option. And many auto shoppers are looking for alternatives to visit showrooms. They don't want to go and get the virus in person. So this data suggests that auto marketers need to provide an effortless user experience. And to do that, as final food for thought, I will submit to you some areas of research that can provide insights to improve the online user experience during and after COVID. For example, any online interface used to facilitate product and brand awareness and offer online purchase options can benefit from testing its overall usability based on what users are trying to accomplish, its information architecture and navigation, the product information it provides, the layout and visual design, the need and effect of credibility signifiers, the top task users perform to help optimize calls to action, the effectiveness and need of various features and functionality, the likelihood of user errors and ways to recover from those errors, and the usability of forms that online forms that users need to fill. So if we use the UX research cycle to just improve the online automotive experience, automotive brands and auto part retailers are likely to pivot effectively to a sustainable use of the online channel in the pre-sale at point of sale stages during and after COVID. So those are the thoughts that I wanted to share with you today. And now I'll hand over the mic to Stephen Popiel. Stephen?
Thank you very much, Michaela, and thanks, JF, and thanks to the MRIA and Dan and Arendetti for inviting me to be part of this very distinguished panel.
Yeah, thanks, Stephen. I have just to let you know, I have the video, so if you continue, I will be able to help support that.
Okay, thank you. So briefly, I work for Phoenix Marketing International, a global marketing research consulting firm which has a core focus on brand and advertising and customer experience work. Phoenix helps brands get the most out of their advertising budget by helping them maximize the link between advertising creative and funnel measures like impression, purchase consideration, and key actions like dealer visits, test drives, online activity. But enough about me and Phoenix. As we've been hearing from both JF and Michaela, this is a very exciting time in the automotive sector. Product refinements, enhancements, innovations, coupled with a pandemic, have led to a very uncertain environment. But if there's one thing I've learned during my years as a market researcher, it's that marketing can help minimize uncertainty and make customers' choices simpler. A boss of mine, Marty Goldfarb, used to say that marketing is a force for change. And given the current state of the world, the automotive sector needs marketing and that force for change more than ever. And the change is everywhere. We see it here, shopping, dealerships are digital. And powertrains, pumps or plugs. And lastly, steering wheels, yes or no. The pace of change is truly breathtaking, but how are customers responding to it? Many of these changes have been driven by externalities. Customers en masse have not been asking for autopilot, and sales of electric vehicles tells us that not everyone wants a plug. And of course, no one asked for a pandemic. So what can customers tell us to help in our marketing initiatives? The pandemic has impacted the auto sector in a multitude of ways. The one I just want to touch on briefly is, how do customers expect you to advertise during this time? In May and July, we asked a group of auto intenders and recent buyers, which of the following best describes how you feel when you see an ad for a company that talks about COVID? Most wanted to hear something about COVID, but between May and July, we see a flip. And where in May, more wanted to hear about COVID and how you were helping the world, it flipped, and in July, more now want to hear you talk about COVID, but also tell you about your product and service. But we did a bit more than just that in the survey. We asked an open-ended question, thinking about car companies in specific. What things should car companies be saying in their advertising? So they could tell us in their own words what they wanted to hear. And here we can see that Canadians are concerned about what's being done to keep employees, dealerships safe. In other words, they still want to buy cars. They want to get them serviced. They just want to know what's being done to keep them safe. And I have to admit, I was very surprised at the number of people, and pleased about the number of people who mentioned employees. What are you doing to keep your employees safe during these times? And the other thing we all know is they want financial help. They're not asking for free cars, at least directly, but value, discounts, 0% financing and financing deals are something they want. And they also want product information. They don't want lifestyle ads. They want to know about features, benefits, as we just heard about, what's new in your vehicle, new quality initiatives, safety, and the like. There are some, of course, like it says in the bottom right, just want things to go back to normal. That's not easy for us to do. But the one key takeaway from all of this is that don't forget you're advertising a product. Don't ignore the pandemic, but don't forget you're advertising a product. Tell them about it. Now, putting aside the pandemic, if there's one area that's truly generating enormous excitement in the auto sector, it's powertrains. Now, electric cars aren't new. My son likes to remind me they're some of the original automobiles, and they've been around since the 1890s. More recently, as we see here, Nissan introduced the first Leaf in 2010, and it's now in its second generation. And they'll be introducing the MRIA next year. But along with Nissan, there are many others. We've got Chevrolets and Fords, VWs coming out with the ID4. The luxury market's full of Tesla fighters like Cadillac Lyriq, Porsche, Taycan and Macan, and the Jaguar I-Pace, to name a few. And we certainly can't forget about trucks, right? You know, we've got Cybertrucks, Rivian, Nikola. We've got electric F-150s that are able to pull trains. But this is just the tip of the iceberg. Most OEMs have large plans for battery electric vehicles. And Toyota, of course, has hydrogen fuel cell vehicles like the MRIA, which have been available in the US since 2014, getting a redesign in 2021. But all of this product still has a major challenge. When Nissan introduced the Leaf, then CEO Carlos Ghosn predicted that BEVs, or battery electric vehicles, would be 10% of the market in 2020. Well, we clearly know that's not the case right now. And while Tesla is doing well in the electric market, or the luxury market, we need to move battery electric vehicles and these powertrains down market to the popular end. And this, of course, requires that customer change again. We have to change the behavior of the customer. Now, in order to increase the sale of these new powertrains, like I said, we need to change their behavior. And we need to change it from a reliance on ICE or internal combustion engines to these more environmentally friendly versions and powertrain options. When we asked Canadian and US auto intenders and buyers in July of this year about their interest in various powertrains, you can see here on the right-hand side, the US is incredibly tied to ICE still. 60% are looking for it, and that's true in both the luxury and non-luxury segment. Canadians, a bit less extremely tied to it, but still The dominant powertrain we're looking at is ICE, even here. Now, my good friend Robert Carwell recently wrote in the Globe that Canada needs smaller battery electric vehicles. But while this is somewhat true, smaller, read lower cost battery electric vehicle won't fully solve the problem. Setting aside the fact that smaller, less costly ones tend to have smaller battery packs, a lower range, the real issue is one of consumer change. I'm still asked if battery electric vehicles have gas engines, and people ask me if I worry about the durability of batteries in my hybrid, and it's 10 years old. So clearly I don't worry about them. There are numerous misconceptions about these things, and advertising is a key way to address these. But quickly, somewhat of a daunting chart, but this is the chart we use to evaluate creative at Phoenix. A couple of things before I get into 2 ads and 2 stories about electrification. Our model is auto-specific, so this is just about automotive. It's country-specific, so Canada and the US and all across Europe have specific models, and it's channel-specific. So we have separate ones for TV and online. And 2 other quick things. The norms that we compare advertising against are moving. They're based on a 12-month rolling average of high volume share of voice ads that are in the marketplace. And we tie performance back to actions. We want to make sure that the advertising and the creative is driving actions and not just a feel-good measure itself. The green here says that the ad that this was used for did very well, so it's, performed very much above norm. But now, onto a couple of ads about electrification. We've got 2 ads here. The Audi one I'm going to show first is a global winner. We looked at it across North America, in Europe, and in every country. It was a strong creative. Viewers connect with it on an emotional level, and it tells them a story that helps overcome all of these kinds of misconceptions that we're talking about.
Wrong one.
Now you see another ad. Unfortunately, I'll be showing you in a little bit. So I'll just tell you a bit more about this ad as we get to it. It's going to talk about electrification in a very engaging way, and it's humorous. And all of this winds up.
I know what you're thinking.
So it does this. It's engaging, it's humorous, it gets at a lot of those, range, charging, cold weather, in a nice, funny way. It breaks through the media clutter. And the one other thing it does is it doesn't lose sight of the fact it's an Audi ad. There's no brand confusion there. Now, we're, of course, a bilingual country, so I thought it would be nice to get, what I'm going to show you now is something from the popular end that also uses humor to overcome range anxiety here. So here, clearly an ad made in Quebec for the Chevy Bolt. Once again, we've got that riff on Michael J. Fox and Back to the Future. But what we do is the interplay between the adult and child, Mary Lou, overcome that concern about energy and range. This, too, was a very strong ad for a battery electric vehicle. It was equal to the e-tron, and it was Canadian made. Both of these ads, the Luxe one and the popular one, work because they tell a story that integrates people, product, features, and benefits in a clear way that's informative, and most importantly, builds that emotional connection with the viewers. And they drive impression, consideration above our norm. But innovations in automotive span much more than powertrains. Cars without steering wheels, like we see here, are no longer a thing of the future. Although when we asked a sample of recent owners and intenders last year about their interest in cars without a steering wheel, more than half said that they will never get into a vehicle like this. And among those who do see themselves in a self-driving vehicle like this, only 10% expect it to happen in the next 5 years, while a third think it's more likely in about 15 years. But aside from these level 5 types of features, the marketing challenge even comes to level 2 driver assist features that are currently available. Features like cruise control, collision avoidance, drowsiness, lane detection, and parking features. Customers are aware of these, and they're being used, but the marketplace has created a challenge in their adoption. Now, this rather busy chart shows 2 things. The orange line shows the number of vehicles on the road in the US data comes from the Department of Transportation. And interestingly, earlier, JF told us that Canada has 26.8 million cars on the road, and we can see that the US has about 268 million cars on the road. Once again, 10 times bigger. But going down, it shows the fatalities per 100,000 or between of 100,000 miles driven, or 100 million miles driven, pardon me. And we can see that back in 1960, in the early 60s, it was above five fatalities, and now it's down to just above one. I've put on here some product enhancements coming down through time. And I want to touch briefly on a couple of last century before getting on to that bottom part, that very crowded part. Front-wheel drive. When front-wheel drive was rolled out, people had to relearn how to drive their car. Skid control, slippery roads, things like that required people to relearn how to drive their vehicle. And then if we go down a bit farther, we can see in the early 80s, ABS came out. And I remember the first time my mother drove a car with ABS. She put her foot on the brakes went crunch, crunch, crunch. She took her foot off the brakes, thinking she had broken them. So there, it wasn't just learning, it was unlearning, of course, because prior to ABS, we had to pump the brakes manually. But we noticed that when these came out, there weren't numerous other types of features. When we look at the bottom of the chart, we see all these innovations rolled out at the same time, and we have to learn how to use them. Phones and cars have become equally tech enhanced in the last 20 years. And this pace of change has been a communication nightmare for some customers trying to keep track of everything. So our question is how to advertise these features to maximize the customer change as measured purchase and adoption of these features. Most ads are like the ones we see here. Blue lines appear on the screen, and you've probably seen ads like this, and they're telling us that this is a feature that does something. And it could be, cars that see each other, cars that read speed limit signs, change cruise control speeds, all kinds of things. But a great ad breaks through, makes that emotional connection, and gets them more interested in the product and feature. And the spot you're now going to see has those classic blue lines, but then they change things up in a very interesting way.
On the outside, there's intriguing design that has been meticulously formed, striking sleek lines sculpted to catch the eye. There's craftsmanship in every stitch, artistry in every angle, thoughtfulness in every detail. But the most remarkable feature of a Lexus SUV is the safety of its passengers. After all, it's what's inside that counts. The Lexus SUV lineup. Experience amazing at your Lexus.
So this spot humanizes that feature, makes the benefit of the vehicle, not the blue lines, not this feature, but the occupants inside, or as they say in that ad, the safety of its passengers. And this humanization single-handedly creates a spot that builds a strong emotional connection. It's relevant, it builds empathy, trust, excitement with the viewers, and it drives all funnel measures, impressions, consideration, and actions above norm. Blue lines may show the feature, but an ad is going to succeed when that feature is relevant and makes that emotional connection with the viewer. So our industry is going through an upheaval of change, and I've just touched on three: the pandemic, powertrains, and driver assist tech. Marketing is crucial to ensuring that this change is successful and the customers embrace these new technologies that pose so many benefits for the environment, people's safety, both drivers and pedestrians. But making adverts that communicate this effectively is hard. It's really hard. Okay, it's really, really hard. I'm in research. It's easy for me to measure these things. It's hard to make an ad at the best of time. Harder still when you have to convince customers to change their behavior, and even harder when you're doing it during a pandemic. But ads that tell a story, a clear story, show how the feature solves a problem, and makes that emotional connection with viewers will always go a long way to helping drive this change. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. Thank you, Stephen, Michaela, Jean-Francois, for such an in-depth look at the auto industry's post-COVID and the trends to watch for. Thank you very much. And the audience, thank you for staying with us. If you have any questions, please type them in the chat box. We've been collecting them. So we'll now move on to the questions. And we have a first question for JF. Do we expect COVID to impact the market penetration or timeline? Referring to your...
So, okay. I'm not sure if I understand, but if COVID is going to have an impact in terms of access to vehicle data, I don't think so. The technology being built in the cars, is on a long planning cycle. Do we see change in the trends? For sure. And obviously the purchases of new car, the purchase of used cars has greatly increased as a result. We don't know yet the full impact on driving behavior and habits that COVID will have. Namely, are we going to continue to commute to work? So all those are going to impact, obviously, in one way or the other, the future of how much we use our car, how often we use our car, and for what purpose we use our cars. But in terms of data access and accessibility to data, I don't think that COVID will necessarily have an impact from that perspective.
Thank you. The next one is from Michaela, Mora. As consumers increasingly look to buy online and get more digital, how does online UX differ from offline UX in automotive?
Thank you for that question, Arundhati. The online buying experience differs from buying offline in several areas. One is the absence of direct human interaction to ask for help, for example. So there is a high chance for errors if there is not well designed. Another is the lack of immediate physical access to the products to evaluate its quality through touch or vision. So the quality of product information and how it's presented is critical in the online experience. For example, when buying auto parts, we know from research that we have done that some people prefer to go to the store to inspect the parts in person and make sure that they have the right one. And then there is the perception of convenience, which is often related to not having to wait to get the product shipped to them. So overall, the online experience needs to overcome certain barriers that are not present in the offline buying experience.
Thank you. The next question is for Stephen Popiel. Are auto companies tracking impressions, consideration, and action funnel measures that you mentioned across their creatives uniformly and in a consistent reporting language in the automotive industry?
All automotive companies are tracking them in one way, form, or another, certainly. And it is all fairly consistent. And that's not just for research reasons, but it's also for reasons of the way that, of course, creative and advertising agencies think about what they're doing as well. They know the importance of ROI, and they're always being asked about the ROI on an ad, whether it's a TV ad, whether it's an online ad, whether it's a brand building ad, or whether it's a retail ad. I mean, we just saw all brand building ads here, but we all see them all the time. Buy my car, it's on sale, one form or another. So yes, they're all tracking a lot of this. Now, some might have subtle differences in nuances and things, but at a macro level, I think it's actually not even just the automotive sector. I mean, most sectors think about this, and the challenge now, of course, with some of the things we were talking about, and certainly some of the things Michaela was just mentioning, is the impact on different channels and what that has on some of these funnel measures and how they're used and how we have to think about them and put them all together. But that's another question and probably a much longer answer.
Fascinating. Thank you. JF, next one's for you. Will Canadians ever be able to profit from the data in their cars?
I hope so. I think it'll come down to legislation. It is going to be up to a policymaker to put in place some aspect of protecting consumer right to own and control their data. I would say the EU is a little ahead of us in that regard. I think there's been a lot more research by the EU Commission in regards to lack of competitiveness as a result of actions by automakers that would control all that data. And so I think there's some good precedent in place in the world. Australia is also moving in that direction. So I would hope that Canadian, U.S. government would also move in that direction. And hopefully there'll be a time. If you want to draw a parallel, we've been using Facebook for the better part of a decade before we start to see legislators and people start to realize they might have to regulate those type of technology. I think we might see the same thing with autonomous vehicle and connected cars, but hopefully it'll take a little less time to get there.
Thank you. Michaela, you mentioned the role of CX in delivering better UX in delivering better CX experiences in your presentation. But how different is UX from CX in delivering better product or service outcomes, and how can auto companies integrate them both effectively?
The separation between UX and CX has to do more with organizational structures and the origin of the different terms. So CX, or customer experience, is the new name for the old voice of the customer or customer satisfaction programs used to track general metrics related to brand loyalty and customer service performance. And historically, this type of research doesn't get too deep into the actual product user experience. The UX term, on the other hand, stems from the human factors science and its applications to product development. So, however, in the expanded definition of UX I mentioned at the beginning, we can see CX, or customer experience, as part of UX. So even if they are different UX and CX teams in a company, they are really looking at the same people along the journey to become customers and stay customers. So the teams need to work together even if they use different lenses to research users. In the end, users are customers and customers are users.
Thank you. The last question for Stephen before we wrap up. Stephen, your charts show a clear decrease in road fatalities in the US in the past century. Has advocacy been a big part of road ad campaigns and the automotive creators in Canada in the recent years?
Thanks very much for that one, Arundhati. Yes, interestingly, even at the beginning, on that chart I showed at the very top, it was the release of a book called Unsafe at Any Speed by a fellow named Ralph Nader that actually started that process. If you look further down, you can actually see MAD it was put on, MADD. And when you see what it was put on, and certainly advertising and advocacy there was a huge part of it. The curve actually goes down fairly steeply at first as well. And to this very day, we see, don't drink and drive. The communications are still online. Car companies themselves, what I remember is, my Ford Pass has a setting so that you can actually determine how loud the radio goes on. So if you have a teenager and you don't want them to be able to put the radio on, you can disable that feature. There were other features they had. So the automotive companies also do all kinds of things to ensure and do the best that they can to maximize the safety of the vehicle. And they've been doing it since the beginning of that Unsafe at Any Speed back in 1963. So all kinds of advocacy, and certainly in many cases they get communicated, whether it's by the auto companies or, like I said, MAD and other organizations like that.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Stephen, Michaela, and GF again for your very illuminating presentations on the auto sector. And thank you everyone for staying with us. If you liked today's webinar and want to connect with us to discuss further opportunities and collaborations, we just launched Accelerate today, and we urge you to look around on the web, on the LMS, and see what opportunities you can discover and more ways to get involved. If you want to be a member, you can get exclusive access to knowledge communities and networking hubs, and you can also grow your side hustle by being an instructor with us. So we look forward to hearing from you, and we really hope you enjoyed today's webinar. Please get in touch and let us know what you think. And we are looking forward to meeting you at our next webinar on October 20th. Thank you very much, everyone, and have a great day.